In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast, brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. My name is Ben Grant, joined as always by JB. We've got another exciting week for you. This week, there are 5 Argos signings to talk about, plus the much anticipated schedule review. JB, last year, you and I crushed it, and I don't think either of us were expecting that. We predicted the entire schedule. I think we only ended up with 3 wrong. I believe we were both 11-3 at the end of things, which I've certainly never been that accurate with a schedule prediction in my life before. But big things are expected, so we'll see if we can duplicate that today. That is all coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Signings, JB. 5 players signed since we last recorded, and I've kind of divided them into 3 categories. There's a couple guys I think are long shots to make the squad. A couple guys that I think are really solid players who have a real chance, not only to make the squad, but maybe to be out there. And then there's a bit of a mystery box in today's signing of Jake Foshee. So let's break these guys down. Let's start with the long shots. Maurice Carnell, the fourth, a DB who I didn't remember being with the Argonauts. So he was with the Argos for a week in 2018, and it wasn't a name that rung a bell for me. He ended up playing 2 seasons in Hamilton, 2019 and then 2020, sort of on and off the practice squad. He was only active for 1 game. I believe it was a game against Toronto, and didn't put up any stats there. Just talking to some of the guys that covered practice, he was moved to boundary half in practice. And so a guy that at North Alabama had played exclusively corner, comes to the CFL, gets bounced from position to position. How tough is it, JB, to be a guy like this, change leagues suddenly to the Canadian League where you've now got the waggle and now you're being asked to be a boundary halfback? Is it maybe something that takes some time?
I think that, they're pretty set in the secondary. I'd be surprised if he made the team. I think it's just a smart churn play. If he happens to really catch coach's eyes, terrific. But that's one of the advantages of being in a position of strength is, I think that it will be hard for him to pick it up, and they're just looking to see if they can catch some lightning.
And if nothing else, they can ask him what Hamilton was thinking with all that single coverage when the Argos were just airing out bombs late in the season last year, because we were never able to really figure that out. Maybe that's the question that they want answered. So they can pick his brain, see what they can learn a little bit from Hamilton's defense. And maybe it is a case though where he just took a little bit of time, and that experience, that practice experience playing boundary half will show something this year. But I don't think there's any real risk with it. I like the move. I think it's good. The other long shot is Conor Flagle, defensive lineman, Central Missouri. So he ended up playing a little bit of Arena League. He spent some time with Ottawa over the last 2 years, and had trouble cracking that roster. And that's not a great sign, just because Ottawa wasn't a good team. But when you do watch his film, there's stuff there to like. He's a big guy. Anytime you bring in an athlete of his size, 6'5", and nearing 300 pounds, who can move, who's got explosion and strength, it's worth a look. And another guy that sort of had to change his position a few times, being moved to the interior. So, maybe this is something that it just takes a little bit of time, and something will show this year. We don't know. But I think, just like we said with Maurice Carnell the fourth, it's probably a guy that's a long shot to make the roster, I would say.
Yeah, I always feel better about bringing in a guy who didn't play or barely played, because if they play a bit, it means the coaches think he's fine, so there's probably not a misevaluation or an overlooking. So if you're going to have somebody overlooked, then they probably should not play at all. So I think the chances of him being a misused player goes up, oddly enough, if his resume is really thin.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty insightful comment, that's why I think both these guys we have to label as long shots, because they have had time. They've been in the CFL, and there wasn't enough there. Now you never know. Change of scenery, change of coaching staff. We don't know exactly how they were being used, and maybe how much of it was system based. Although in both of those cases, that wouldn't really make sense to me, but. We never know. So we'll see what happens when these guys come into camp. Let's move on to our next two signings. Two solid players in Dion Harris and Isaiah Wright, both of whom spent some time with the Washington football team. Let's start with Dion Harris, defensive back, North Dakota. His story is kind of an interesting one. So he was being touted as sort of a mid-round draft pick for the NFL and ended up with an Achilles tear. I think it was in his junior season. And that is enough on its own to wipe you off a lot of draft boards. Achilles tear, small school, you've got a lot of strikes against you already. He ended up on Washington's practice roster. Never really was able to crack anything with Washington, but there's a lot to like for him. He's 6'3", almost 200 pounds. As a DB, I think there's a ton of potential there. He's got huge reach. And another guy that I could see sort of playing all over the field. He didn't. He spent a little bit of time with the DC Defenders, the XFL. Didn't really get onto the field much. It was right at the end of the season there where he finally got into the field. So I didn't really get too much out of that tape. But I certainly like his measurables. And this is a guy who hasn't played in the CFL yet. So I think there's a real chance here. You like what he did in college. There's no question about that. So maybe he stands out in camp.
Yeah, I think that he's got the measurables, and we talked a lot about this last year. I've always been really impressed with their ability to bring in guys who have good numbers, who might just need a shot. There's no reason not to be optimistic about him. That he clearly is an elite athlete. So I think that's. He's not a starter. Nobody they're signing right now is going to be a starter. This is a championship caliber team. But, you bring in a depth guy who can come in and, give the starters a look in practice, who can, fill in a game where you've got some injuries and he can go out there and, not be a disaster. These are all important parts of a team. So, is this guy going to change the course of the Argos? No, but can he be a useful addition for a really good price? Yeah, I think so.
I think he's on the team in some capacity. I don't know if it's practice roster or if, if he ends up dressing or not. But I do think there's enough there that he's going to stick around for a while. But we'll have to see. Just another guy. I'm so excited about camp. We're getting so close to camp. And we've been talking about some of these guys. We know the team so well from last year. But all these new faces that are coming in, and including some of these CFL signings, the guys we brought in from Hamilton, for example, and Davis and Banks, and seeing Markeith Ambles out there. I want to see all this stuff on the field so we can sort of stop. Not that we'll stop speculating, we'll continue that, but I really want to see them play football. And so this is another guy I want to see him play football. Let's talk about Isaiah Wright. This is the one I'm most excited about of the 5 signings in the last week. Isaiah Wright's a player. I think the question with him is, I don't know what exactly to do with him, and I don't know what the Argos have in mind. I think probably what I have in mind is different from what they're thinking, and that's okay. But let me tell you a little bit about Isaiah Wright. So he's at Temple. And in his 4 seasons at Temple, he moved around a ton. So when he got there as a freshman, he was a running back. It was where he saw most of his time, and he was also a Wildcat quarterback. That tells you a couple of things right off the bat. We'll come back to some of that stuff. A little bit more of that in his sophomore season, and he started playing a lot more receiver. Was basically a slot receiver as a junior, and a really good one. And then as a senior, they moved him out wide, and that didn't work quite as well. And he wasn't getting those Wildcat quarterback snaps. He wasn't getting any snaps in the backfield. They were still using him occasionally on jets and things like that. But really, that's a better slot job, and that's what he saw a lot of in his huge season as a junior. The other way he really contributed in college was he was an excellent punt and kick returner. So 84 kick returns, averaging 24.2 yards. Had a couple of touchdowns, 43 punt returns, averaging over 10 yards a return with 3 touchdowns. And somewhere along the way was named a first-team All-AAC return specialist. So, those are things I'm excited about, even without the offensive numbers, because we've been begging for a kick returner, punt returner. We've got a few guys now that I'm excited to see in camp that can return kicks, can return punts. So that's an element I like. Anyway, he doesn't get drafted, ends up signing as an undrafted free agent with Washington football team, and has a decent season for a rookie, especially an undrafted rookie. Not only makes the roster and dresses, but he's out there catching footballs. 27 catches, 197 yards. Those are great numbers for an undrafted free agent rookie, and that's his 2020 season. And expectations were pretty high going to the next year, and he just couldn't make that final cut down. Right before the start of the 2021 season, he was a victim of last cuts, and now here he is heading north to Toronto for the Argos. So there's a ton to like about this guy, JB.
Yeah, I think that he, going on my earlier comment, I think that he is somebody who can be a part of the starting roster. I think he is part of a shadow wide receiver room that they're building. So I think if you're, if you are somebody who has returned kicks and has run jets, I'd be concerned because there's some competition in town.
Yeah. And where I really like him is at running back. And I know this is a weird one because he hasn't played running back since he was a freshman. He did take some backfield snaps as a sophomore, but he hasn't really played consistently at running back since his first year of college. I love his vision in traffic. That's the best thing he brings. If everything that he brings and all the skill that he has, his vision in traffic is elite. He just has a way of just calmly navigating through bodies. He doesn't panic, and he's really hard to get a hold of. He's very slippery. He turns his bodies, contorts himself at the weirdest angles. He's got terrific feet, and I love him coming through the line. And that's partly what made him such a good kick and punt returner. It's also where he got a lot of his yards as a receiver. It's not the other stuff. Like his hands are okay. He's not great at catching the ball in traffic. That's not something he does well. That's probably why at Temple they moved him to the outside where he wouldn't have to do that so much. But where that hurt him is that you don't have the opportunities on the outside where you catch the ball in space and now have an opportunity to sort of pinball your way through the field. And pinball is maybe the wrong term to use on an Argos podcast. This guy's 6'2", 220, so don't think Pinball Clemens. But he does, he does have that elite vision, and he does have those quick feet. So I would love to see him used in a creative way, getting jet sweeps, using some of those misdirection plays that I know Coach Dinwiddie had a lot in the Calgary system that we didn't really see last year. You and I talked about Chandler Worthy being the perfect guy to see some of that like 2019 Calgary stuff with fake jets and fake jet flat passes and stuff. And we never really saw that used with Worthy. Maybe this is something that we see from Isaiah Wright.
Yeah, I mean, Worthy was certainly the guy I had in mind as to, who he's probably competing with. The football is a copycat sport. Deebo Samuel has become an absolute star in San Francisco as an all-purpose Swiss Army knife. And I'm sure football coaches are reevaluating and thinking, look, there's probably not every wide receiver, but there's probably wide receivers out there who can be damn good running backs and can do both. And so this guy fits the bill. Like, if you were a coordinator, who wouldn't want Deebo Samuel on your team? So why not go looking and see if you can find him? I wouldn't be surprised to see a bit of that. They're certainly watching the NFL too, and he was one of the best players in the league. So why not try and find somebody who might be able to do some of that? It's obviously high praise, and is this guy going to come in and be Deebo Samuel? But I can I can respect the shot.
Yeah, he's not Debo Samuel. He doesn't have the top end speed and that same level of explosion, but his game is certainly modeled in the same fashion, and he has a lot of those same attributes, although not quite the same level. That's something I'm excited about. Remember, there's only 3 running backs on this roster. We get a ton of fullbacks, only 3 running backs on the roster. But if he's not being brought in as a running back, if that's not at all what they're thinking, which is most likely not what they're thinking, I think they probably think of him strictly as a receiver. Now we got to start asking, why are there so many big body slot receivers that we're bringing in here? There's suddenly a lot of guys that are looking like receivers Toronto's already got on the roster. And we talked about this a little bit before. This makes me nervous. I like the team. I do get attached to guys. It's not something that where I want to see guys traded away or guys released. But the Argos in the defensive backfield and in that receiver room, they've got a lot of guys who can do the same kinds of things. And if Isaiah Wright looks really good in camp, his bill is not nearly as high as some of the other guys, and that it's exciting, but that worries me. And the Argos, if they need to free up some space, that may be an answer there. So we'll see how this all shakes out. But at this moment, the Argos basically have 8 guys that I feel really comfortable starting, and of course, you only need 5. Let's move on to our mystery box. So today's signing, Jake Foshee. This is a pretty interesting one. And so initially when I saw this come across the wire, I didn't pay too much attention. I had never watched Oklahoma Baptist University film. I don't know if I've even watched any GAC film. I think I watched someone from Henderson State a few years ago, but I can't even remember that. So, sitting down to watch the film, my expectations were not very high. It didn't take very long for me to become interested. So I ended up kind of going down this film wormhole. I watched a few games of OBU Bison film, and then started navigating through. I ended up back at Jake Foshee's high school film where he was playing center. And this really intrigues me because as soon as you show me that you have positional versatility, especially as a center, that's got my attention. On top of that, he was the team's long snapper and a very good long snapper too. Now, I don't think he's CFL caliber long snapper because he doesn't have the speed for coverage. That part's not going to be there. But somebody who can step in. We saw, the Argos lost their long snapper last year mid-season, and you have a situation where in the middle of the game you've got someone that steps in. We've seen how they value that skill, even with like the drafting of Sam Baker a couple of years ago. Anyone that can long snap definitely is a bonus to have on your team. And you add to that, he can play center, he can play both guard spots, he can play both tackle spots. That's pretty interesting. Now, his film, I had a really tough time generating too much in the way of notes. His competition just wasn't very good. His run blocking didn't stand out as a positive to me, but it wasn't that he was getting beat. It's just I hated how he was executing his run blocking, but he didn't really need to. So I can't really tell, is this a level of competition thing? He was able to seal his guys. He'd often sort of go into, pass dropbacks and sort of draw blocking, and effectively so. He cleared space. He made the hole. But there's nothing in his run blocking that stood out and thought, that's a guy we need on the team. Pass blocking is another thing, though. Is pass blocking strong? Get the stat, JB. 3 sacks allowed in 1,349 snaps. That's a ridiculous number. If you're only allowing 3 sacks and that many pass attempts, you're doing something right. I don't care what level you're at.
He seems like a guy who a coach has recommended. This is a prospect from deep in the weeds. This is not somebody that they would have come across, in general scouting. So you look at Chris Sweet, and we talked about how this is going to be a big test for him to try and put together his own O-line, especially with the release. And that's what this feels like. It feels like a guy, new Coach Sweet from from his days, coaching in the United States, and there's a connection here, and he's like, I got a guy for you. And so to me, that seems really encouraging. I mean, the randomness or the obscurity of this signing feels like an inside, some inside information. So I hope that's what it is.
I'm sure it is. It's too odd otherwise, because that, like you say, you're bringing in a guy from D2 at OBU. There's a reason for it. It's not just they were sitting down watching OBU film and they're like, hey, this guy stands out. There's something more than that. There's too much. The scouts for the Argos are amazing. We talk about them all the time. We praise them all the time. They do a great job. They cannot watch every single snap of football played in North America. And so somewhere along the way, someone said something. Someone said, hey, look at this guy. They took a look and they were impressed. What I love about him in pass protection is that he doesn't get outsmarted. He's either a great film study guy, or he's just got really intelligent instincts. Something about his play, it just stands out as very bright, because he doesn't get beat on twists. He doesn't get surprised by blitzes. He doesn't get caught out of position. And that's why he's only allowed those 3 sacks. Now, to me, so he's 6'4", 290. Based on how the Argos assign their linemen, that doesn't really mean anything. We've got 6'8" guards, which I hate, but we've got a bunch of them, and shorter tackles and guys that, like Dion Allen. I swore up and down that he should be a guard, and there he is playing tackle all last season, and one of the most consistent linemen in doing that. And so I don't know how they see it. I see him as a guard. I think he's got CFL guard written all over him. The fact that he's played some center tells you that he's able to handle the interior line. And I'm not sure he's quite fast enough to be on the edge. I'm just not sure he's a tackle at this level. Maybe he is, but I haven't seen enough to say that I would put him there comfortably. So to me, he's a guard with the potential to play anywhere, because he's played right tackle through left tackle. So yeah, I'm excited. It's just yet another guy that I'm excited to see in camp. Who knows what he turns into, but yeah, I'm intrigued. And like you said, anytime you bring in a guy from an obscure school like this, we have to raise our eyebrows. JB, let's move on to the schedule. So, are we going to be able to duplicate our winning percentage from last year? You know what was so weird about last year? We didn't collaborate on it last year, and yet we ended up picking the exact same win-loss records throughout the regular season. The only way we differed is I think we went all the way through to the Grey Cup, and you did end up having Winnipeg Hamilton in the Grey Cup, and I had Toronto Saskatchewan, who were the Eastern and Western final representatives. But yeah, we crushed it pretty well last year. I can't imagine we'll be on the same page all the way through this, and I can't imagine that even half of what we've predicted is correct after last year. But let's work our way through it. So opening week, I've got a bye. Do you also have a bye?
I do. So I don't think that's great for the Argos. I don't think they're a team that needs a first week bye. So I don't think it's the end of the world, but I'm not crazy about a first week bye.
Yeah, you got 3 buys built in, but I hate first week buys. And it might have been fine last year with such a new group together, but it's basically the same returning starters from last season. So they don't need the gel time that they needed last year. So yeah, I don't like that first week bye. Week 2 is the home opener and the season opener for the Argos. Thursday, June 16th, Montreal comes to town. How do you see this, JB?
I like Toronto at home. I think Toronto has shown that they are winners at home. Even if the home is not necessarily as electric. Oddly enough, probably the best home crowd they had all season was the final. Didn't quite get it done, but they have shown that they are a good home team. I like them to beat Montreal at home. I like them to win the home opener.
I also like them too. I've got this as a win. And I just think, like you said, Toronto plays well at home, but also Montreal's opening the season with 2 straight road games. Teams don't play well back-to-back weeks on the road. And to start a season, that's just not a great schedule for Montreal. So I think
it's a nice
Toronto
perk.
wins.
I mean, from even our days, like when you play a team week 2 and they played the week before, and you have all that film and they have nothing. That's a nice perk.
Yeah, for sure. No, I like everything about this except I just hate the bye part. You could use that later to rest guys, but that's okay. So 1-0 to start the season. Week 3 at BC, June 25th. How do you see this one?
Look, I think going to BC and winning is still tough. I think that's still, you gotta travel across the country. They didn't have a lot of trips last year. This is a pretty long trip to go and play, and you're looking at a BC team that is not particularly good. I still see Toronto coming out on top. I think Toronto has to. I think if they are who I think they are, which is championship caliber, you cannot lose to the BC Lions, even at home in week 3. You have to. This is a professional win game, and so it'll tell us a lot.
This is the first time we've differed in 2 years. I have this as a loss. I don't think BC is going to be a great team. I think they have weapons. I think early in the season is when you want to play them. I just think it's a long road trip. It's the furthest this team has been by far, and they didn't do that well on the road last year, especially out west. They had that opening week win in Calgary, just barely, but they got blown out at Winnipeg, got blown out at Saskatchewan, didn't go to Edmonton or BC. It's a long trip. It's a tough place to play. The last time the Argos played at BC, they lost by 47, I think. I until I see it differently, this is a loss for me. I've got them at 1-1, and you've got 2-0.
Yeah, I mean they showed they showed a hot and cold last year for sure. But I just think, it's a nice week, right? They play on Thursday, then they don't play again till Saturday. If you're going to head out west, that's a pretty nice week heading into that game. I do. I just don't think BC is going to be good enough to beat the Argos.
I hope you're right. Week 4, at home against Winnipeg. I'll go first this time. I've got this as a win. I think you got a long week to recover after this. I don't think Winnipeg, I still think they're good, and I still think they're the team to beat. I don't think they're as good as they were last year. They're also coming off what's going to be a pretty emotional game against Hamilton, because Hamilton is going to give them everything they have and more. I think the Argos, especially in my scenario where they're losing in BC, I think they come home and get it done with a win against Winnipeg.
I also have a win against Winnipeg. I think they feel confident that they can play with Winnipeg. I think that they're going to be excited at the way the team is building. We're 2-0, and now here comes a heavyweight. I really feel that this is a game that they're going to be ready for, and I do see Winnipeg taking a step back this year. I think two Grey Cups. It's going to be hard to keep. It's just hard to keep that level of intensity and desire up. It's very natural for a team to take a step back. I think Winnipeg takes a step back. I think we're 3-0 here.
Are you going all the way through to 18-0 just so we can get this out of the way?
I am not.
All right. Always the optimist, JB, 3-0. I've got us at 2-1 here. Week 5 is another bye. 3 games and 2 byes. Not great. Maybe this is a good regrouping point, and we do have the Touchdown Atlantic game coming the week after this. But I just don't like where this bye is placed at all. The third bye is great, but yeah, these first 2. This is where you want your first bye. You want to have 3 games and a bye. I think that's the perfect schedule. But yeah, bye, 3 games bye. Not awesome. So Touchdown Atlantic, July 16th, Saskatchewan in Wolfville. How do you see this one? Your Argos are 3-0 at this point.
Yeah, I think this is gonna be a tough beat for Toronto. Out east, I don't know what they're doing for a crowd.
Saskatchewan travels. There's gonna be melon heads.
Yeah, no,
all over
it's
Wolfville.
not going to be a Toronto crowd. I think it's going to be a Saskatchewan crowd. I have Saskatchewan winning this game. I think it's too bad that Toronto is giving up a home game. They are a very good home team. I think that that's going to be a loss. I see a Saskatchewan crowd and a Saskatchewan win.
I think it's going to be a tough game. I've got this as a win. My rationale is coming off a bye week. I actually quite liked how the Argos looked last year when they had time, to do some things, when they had time to prepare. I felt like the two situations in which the team looked ready to play, it didn't always work out as a win, but I liked them in back-to-backs. I liked them, in those home and homes. I liked them in the second end of those home and homes, and I liked them when they had time, when they had practice time. So I think it's going to be a tough one, like you say, and I don't think they're going to have a huge home field advantage in Wolfville. But I think that's a win. So both of our Argos are now at 3-1. Week 7, JB, it's the back end of a home and home. We're at Saskatchewan now, 7 days later. How do you see it?
Yeah, I see Saskatchewan sweeping the home and home. I think Saskatchewan is a very good team. As I said in our power rankings, I like the Argos. I think the Argos are good. I think Saskatchewan is an elite team. I think they are the best team in the CFL, and I see the games close, but I think Saskatchewan's going to beat Toronto in both games.
That's interesting. I've got them as a loss too, but I think for me it's almost the back-to-back road games thing, because I know it counts as a home game. Touchdown Atlantic, out east, but that's not really a home game. It's going to be a weird week. It's going to be a weird trip. They're going to be really disoriented. I don't know what their travel schedule is like. I know there's going to be a lot of events planned. I would imagine they're going to spend a little more time out there than they usually do. I believe that's what happened in 2019. So, I think you're coming off a weird week going into probably the toughest place to play in the CFL in Saskatchewan. I also think that's a loss, week 7. And so now we've both got the Argos sitting at, we both got the Argos sitting at 4-2 now. And that moves us into week 8. This is a weird one. Sunday, 5:00, home to Ottawa. What do you see?
I don't know. That is a very it's a very odd. Is Monday the holiday there?
So
must be right. The first Monday in August.
Well, it's July 31st.
Yeah,
and so August 1st is the holiday, right?
Yeah,
is that how that works?
I believe it's the first Monday is the holiday.
I think you're right.
I'm usually in Halifax for the summer, so I don't know how Toronto gets down in the summer.
So either way, a 5:00 start on a Sunday is odd. Yeah. Ottawa is hard to get up for after these back-to-back Saskatchewan games. Are they going to be able to pull it out?
No, Ottawa is not. Toronto is going to win that game handily. Back at home, not very happy about Saskatchewan, and we're going to take it out on the Black Reds.
I think this is a loss.
Oof, no.
The reason I say that, so hear me out. When you're thrown off your schedule, it does odd things. And I'm telling you, that 5:00 start after these 2 games against a really solid team. And remember, I have them splitting, right? I get it in your case, coming off back-to-back losses. I think in that scenario, I think you do beat Ottawa. But I think if you're splitting those the way I think you are, kind of splitting that home and home, and then you come back for this weird kickoff time on a Sunday, potentially a holiday weekend, if only we had access to the internet or something like that would tell us. I think they just kind of get caught with their pants down here and just mail it in. I think this is one of those games where you need a meeting afterwards to sort yourself out.
Oh, you do need a meeting. I agree, but I don't think they're going to need a meeting. They're not going to lose to Ottawa.
All right, so that's that'll be one to watch. I'm telling you, I see that happening. I don't feel good about that game against Ottawa. All right, let's move to week 9. This is the beginning of the first leg of 2 home and homes against Hamilton. We play Hamilton 4 times in the next 5 games, which is just a weird schedule quirk. I hate this part of the schedule. So week 9, August 6th, home to Hamilton. I'll start this one off. I've got this as a win because to me, they're rebounding in my universe. They're rebounding from this embarrassing loss to Ottawa. And I think they go on a bit of a tear here because that's sort of the low point of the season and they start turning things around. So I actually think they're going to look really good against Hamilton August 6th, rebound from that embarrassing loss and post a win on their Ontario rivals.
Yeah, I think they win. I mean, they owe Hamilton. Hamilton beat us in the final. So, payback is due. They're at home. I like the Argos to beat Hamilton here.
I've lost track of our scores at the moment, but I'll do a tally in a second, and we'll figure this out. But let's move into week 10. This is the second half of the home and home. Not on a holiday, which is terrific, but it is in Hamilton. Second leg of the back-to-back. I've got another win. I think Toronto sweeps this early head-to-head with Hamilton. I think Toronto's the better team, and I think there's something to. I'll tell you right now, we're not going to see an Argos win on Labor Day. It just doesn't happen. But everywhere else, I love Toronto. Now playoffs. There are going to be some memories from last year. We'll talk about that down the line. Regular season, if it's not like a 1:00 start on a holiday, I feel very good about it. So yeah, I think they take this one.
I do not have a win here. I think they split. We've talked about that before. Even though I talked about Saskatchewan sweeping, it's very hard to beat a team back to back. It's just tough. You've shown a lot to get the first win, and it's much easier to counter game plan when you lose than to come up with something when you win. So I like Hamilton here at home.
So we both got them at 5-3 thanks to my quick math, and that moves us into week 11, home to Calgary. Now what I love about this stretch, the summer's so strange. You notice that basically the Argos don't leave Ontario all summer. They're at BC June 25th. Oh, and that's not true because they do have the Touchdown Atlantic game, even though that's a home game. They do leave the province for that. But really, that's it. Then, they have that game in Saskatchewan, and then it's Ottawa, Hamilton, home to Calgary, Hamilton, Ottawa. And it's not like until October that they're back out on the road again. So this is it's just such a weird stretch of the schedule. So week 11, home to Calgary, is this a guys getting up to play against their former team, or is this a revenge game for Calgary?
I think Calgary would like the revenge, but I believe that they do not have the weaponry. I don't think they have the quarterback. I don't think they're very good. I think they're going to take a step back. I think Toronto took all of their good players and their mojo, and Toronto will be ready for Calgary and will beat Calgary. That's another win at home.
Yeah, I agree. I see it going exactly that way. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I do think it's a tight game, but I do think there's something about getting up for this. There's so many guys in this Toronto roster that are going to make sure this is one of their best games. You've also got coaches that want to prove themselves. Coach Mace that wants to prove himself. Coach Bell, Coach Dinwiddie. There's a lot of Calgary here, and they're going up against their old guys. That's a win. Week 12. Friday, August 26th versus Hamilton. So home again to the Tiger Cats. How's this one going?
I like it again. They've shown that they're great at home. I think they'll look at this back to back and really concentrate on getting the first half. I think pulling a Labor Day game is going to be tough. I think they really concentrate on splitting and getting the first.
I don't think they win this. I think it's an emotional letdown. I think that game against Calgary, they're going to be so hyped up for. So much of this team has Calgary ties, and we saw it last year. They went into Calgary, won in dramatic fashion, and were flat the next week. Now, Winnipeg makes a lot of teams look flat, but they just didn't have it. the next week in Winnipeg. And I worry that happens again. In my universe, Hamilton will have lost twice to the Argos already. Coming down the highway to BMO, I think Hamilton's taking it seriously. I think Toronto's still on that emotional high, and then has this sort of crash against Hamilton. So for me, that's a loss. Week 13, Labor Day, loss. JB?
Yeah, I think it'll be very hard for them to go in and win 2 Labor Days in a row.
I hate playing there on Labor Day. Why can't it change? Why is it never in Toronto on Labor Day? Why do we have to play Hamilton? That place is rabid. It's not fair. It's not like a normal football game. And for anyone else who's got another team who maybe, I don't know why you'd be listening to this podcast, but if you're not an Argos fan, you see your team out west, whatever it is, you're like, hey, what's the big deal? We got to play the same guys on Labor Day. You don't understand. Playing Hamilton on Labor Day is not normal. It's like this weird, bizarro Hamilton, and they go. It's their Grey Cup every year. Even when they're in the actual Grey Cup, this is still their Grey Cup, and the Argos just can't win this game. I hope they turn it around. I am not betting on it.
No, I don't have a win here.
Week 14 at Ottawa, 2:00 start Saturday. These Ottawa schedules. The third game's a pretty normal one, but yeah, this is another weird one. They're not going to lose to Ottawa in this game. In my universe, they lost to Ottawa already, and that will be their quota for the year. I think they get in there after getting beat, maybe even embarrassed on Labor Day, and I think they just blow Ottawa up. That's a win.
Yeah, me too. I have them. Well, no spoilers here, but yeah, I have them taking this Ottawa game as well.
And that sends them into a bye before going back to Ottawa.
So weird. Back to back, away.
With a bye in the middle. I don't even know, like, if you... I don't know. This schedule is so odd.
That's a loss for me in Week 16. If Ottawa can't win the back half of a back-to-back with a bye in the middle, then, bag up the balls and put the shirts in a nice closet and call it a day. Because that is, you want a litmus test, that is PH new coaching staff.
I get that. I think this is a win. Just based on the other things that I said, it's not a true back-to-back road games, or what would be 3 straight road games, because you've got the bye in the middle. And so that resets you.
They have to. If you lose back-to-back home games to the same team with a bye in the middle, then you have to... I think you have to, like any good samurai, take a sword and, end it.
Ottawa lost like 8 straight road games. Like this is not
game.
Home games. I mean, like this is not a team that has proven themselves recently. I do expect them to be better.
I respect their coaching staff. I think you would have to be. You would have to be an absolutely incompetent coaching staff to not get a win in Week 2. I just can't see Toronto winning both.
And the reason I see it is because of that earlier Toronto loss, and that's what you don't have. See, I think after, in my universe, with that early loss to Ottawa on that weird Sunday in July, 5:00 start, I think that prevents them from losing again to Ottawa. Now, you don't have that. You've got that as a win. And so, yeah, I get the psychology of that late in the season. Ottawa desperate for a win, second week at home. But yeah, in my universe, the way I've played it out, I think Dinwiddie and the team adjusts well. It's not a huge road trip. And I don't think Ottawa's a great team. They're better, but they're not great. So yeah, that's back-to-back wins for me. All right, let's hit Week 17. Finally, an actual road trip at Calgary, October 1st. This is a loss for me. This is now to the point where we're too many road games in a row. Even with that bye, you've now got 4 straight road games at Hamilton, at Ottawa, at Calgary. Even with that bye, it's too much travel. Calgary's looking to get revenge for that earlier loss at BMO. And I just don't have them winning out west a lot. So yeah, I think that's a loss.
No, same. I think Calgary gets to win at home.
Week 18, hosting the BC Lions. I've got to win. I think BC is falling apart at this stage of the season. I think they're figuring things out for next year. By the time we get to week 18, I think this is a pretty comfortable win for the Argos.
Yep, at home, BC flying in. Again, weird time. But by week 18, those guys are on Expedia. Let's 1, 2, 3 U-Haul.
Although last year, remember how weird that game was, where the Argos should have lost like 10 different times, and Beattie sort of had was doing his magic, and BC was missing field goals and extra points and all sorts of things that should have ended the game. And really, those were two different classes of teams. The Argos should have crushed BC, and now they had Michael Riley, and that's
I think they look at this game though. I think if you look at this game, this is a huge home win because they're about to have two tough road and really a really tough final 3 games here. So I think they look at this BC win as like a must-have.
Yeah, I see that.
No chance they overlook this BC game. I mean, it is a must-have. They gotta have that BC game.
Week 19 at Edmonton. First trip out there since they have become the Elks. They lost to Edmonton last year, but that was weird. That was the game that didn't matter because it was the makeup game due to the COVID outbreak on the Edmonton team early in the season. Toronto started no starters, almost won it at the end. But this is also the Chris Jones revenge game, maybe. How does this one play out for you?
Yeah, I like Edmonton to win. I think Edmonton's going to be a great team. I think they're going to be the surprise of the West. I think going out west is going to be a challenge. I think, they'll want to beat Coach Jones. I think it's going to be. I think it's close. It's hard. What Edmonton's quarterback situation is going to be like. I just give it a loss.
I've got this as an Argos win, and what I think is going to happen, I am worried about the Chris Jones factor because he's going to be up for this game. But you know who else is going to be up for this game is McLeod Bethel-Thompson, because his quarterback coach left to Edmonton. This is a game that McLeod Bethel-Thompson is going to have circled on his calendar. I think just because of that, because you can't help, and I know that there are other reasons. You've got promotions and you've got other opportunities and you want to change it up. I think that all makes sense. But I think in a quarterback's mind, you can't help but take that personally a little bit. And I think McLeod Bethel-Thompson is going to absolutely light it up in this game. And it still comes down to the wire. I think that's an Argos win. Week 20 at Montreal. The season finishes with yet another back-to-back. This one at Montreal and then home against Montreal. So October 22nd at Montreal. How does it go?
Oh, I mean, I wish I could say they were going to win, but is this the year they finally win? Do they finally, this is probably a division clinching win. If they could get that in Montreal, I mean, that would be pretty amazing. I'm going to give them the win. I ruled against them in Edmonton. I'm going to say this is the year they go into Montreal and get a win.
Yeah, I think so too. I know what they're going up against like you do. And I know the hesitation that you feel. I feel that too. I think, like you said, I think they're going to need it. I think this clinches, and it means that they can rest in that second half of the back-to-back. It'll be a little bit like that Edmonton game, except hopefully not the quality of the game. But I do think that season finale may not mean anything for the Argos. It may mean something to Montreal, but I think Toronto goes into Montreal. They get that win. I think they clinch first in the East with that win. And then going into week 21, back at BMO against Montreal, I've got that one as a loss because I think they're resting guys.
Yeah, same. That's, I mean, based on what we have, that this last game shouldn't matter.
It could flip if Toronto doesn't win in Montreal, then I do think they win at home, the season finale against BMO, but I just don't see it going down that way. All right, let me just do a quick tally here, JB. All right, our final tally. So I have the Argos going 11-7. JB, you've got the Argos going 10-8. I've got them 6-3 at home, 5-4 on the road. Now you hear that number. How does 10-8 sound?
Yeah, I probably, I mean, I go back and forth 10-8, 11-7. I think Montreal, Toronto, and Hamilton are going to beat up on each other. I do think 10 is enough to win the division. Could I lean towards a win in Edmonton over, Arbuckle? Yeah, I could be conversed in that pretty easily to be 11-7. I'm going to stick 10-8. I think that's still enough to win the division, but I can see 11-7. I don't see more than 11-7, but I don't disagree. I don't think that you're being pie-eyed optimist there.
No, I think this is pretty fair, and like you said, I think the division will beat up on each other. I don't think there's going to be a runaway. I think probably Hamilton or Montreal ends up also at 10-8, one of those two teams, and I think Toronto ends up with the tiebreaker. So I think even in your scenario, they still win the East. In my scenario, the 11-7 has it clear by a game. So yeah, I think that's pretty fair, and that's pretty much what the fans think too. We did a poll on our X's and Argos Twitter account, seeing how the fans thought this season was going to go, and the vast majority of people responding felt that they were somewhere between 10 and 13 wins. That was the window. There weren't that many people that were outside of that mark. So yeah, we're right in there. So
yeah,
I think we're in line with everyone else.
I think they're a good team. We've talked about. But are they substantially better than last year's team? That is not my belief. So
I do think they're better than last year's team. I think the schedule is very different. A longer schedule. There just aren't a lot of Argos teams that just rip through the regular season. Just historically, there aren't that many. Often these teams that get to the Grey Cup, they're around that mark. They go into the playoffs around 10 wins.
Yeah, I think they are better in places. I don't think they are, I don't think they're, 13-5 better. I don't think that's in the cards.
Yeah, I think they would need a ton of breaks. I don't see that happening either. It's so tough to put up a record like that. I know teams do, but it's a long schedule. It's a long season. So many things happen. I wouldn't be stunned, but yeah, I would be surprised if they get as high as 13. So
yeah, that's fine.
11-7.
That's a fine season in terms of getting ready for the playoffs.
Yeah, they win the East. So, what can you say? I think that sets them up for it. Do you want to do a quick how far they go, or are we going to save that for another time?
Speak it.
All right, so I see them into the Eastern Final. I think it's going to be Montreal in the Eastern Final. It's at BMO. I think they win that game. I think I like Montreal. I don't think they've got as much going on as Toronto does. Toronto's going to have that extra week to prepare. I think they will gain from that experience last year in the Eastern Final, and I think they win this and head off to the Grey Cup.
Yeah, what will be huge is, does Hamilton go to Montreal or Montreal to Hamilton?
Yeah.
Montreal is absolutely a machine at home. If Montreal can bring Hamilton in, I think Montreal wins. And I agree. I think that it's right there for them to get back into the Grey Cup. I think it'll come down to coach and Macbeth, and can he elevate the team? And that question has not been answered yet. Not, last year, I think it's a compliment to say they didn't answer no, that the question is still open, but now the question, I think, has to be asked: Can he put the team on his back, and be a CFL champion? That question will be answered this year.
So I have them in the Grey Cup. It's at Saskatchewan, and I have them facing the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Oof. Well,
It's like a movie.
I have them at Saskatchewan, in Saskatchewan, and I have them upset of the century.
Against Saskatchewan?
in Saskatchewan, and it'll be delicious, delicious watermelon juice.
I don't want any part of that game. I'd love to win
one
it.
for the ages. I love it. I love we go in there and we're just gonna ruin their wheat fest.
I want no part of playing Saskatchewan in Saskatchewan for the Grey Cup.
No, I love it.
The pressure would be immense on the riders.
It's great. We're gonna shock the world. Pinball will be there. He'll eat it up. It's gonna be an all-time Toronto dunk on the West.
And I have them in a far less exciting fashion beating the Bombers with a home crowd advantage because everybody in Saskatchewan, there's no one, they don't like the Argos. They hate the Bombers. And so I think you've got a home crowd advantage, which is so rare for the Argos on the road. But that's one in Saskatchewan. Yeah, people are going to be cheering for the Argos to beat the Bombers. People are ready to move on from the Bombers, and no one more so than Rider fans. So yeah, that's a Grey Cup victory. JB, let's see it all the way through. That's a great season. I love it. 11-7 or 10-8, a Grey Cup win. That would just about do it for us on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Check out our website for all of the latest signings, articles, information, everything that you need. And of course, we'll be back next week as we continue with our weekly podcast. And we're going to start getting you set for the global draft and the CFL draft. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.